Hey guys, this is day 18 of my journey to 2000 on chess.com, and I analyzed a Tata Steel game from day 3, I believe it was. And I also did 15 puzzles, and I watched some YouTube videos. I didn't do much else, but analyzing the game was really fun. And I was wondering, is it better to analyze a draw or a win? Because in a draw position, I feel like both players are playing the best moves, but it might not be as interesting or maybe, I'm not really sure. I ended up analyzing the drawn position because it's higher accuracy, and I think I could maybe learn or draw a lot from it. That being said, in the future, I will try to also analyze winning positions, but let's get into the game and see what happened. It was pretty interesting. So I'm going to go over some of the stuff I learned here too, and from the YouTube videos I watched, which will be in the description. So let's start. The game starts in a Sicilian with a Sicilian, and I don't know the variations of the Sicilian. I know it's played differently. There's a bunch of different ways it could be played as black, but black connects these pawns. And the next couple of moves I just, I'm thinking about, and every move I think about why they're doing the move. I predict what move they'll do, and then I use the engine to see where those different routes lead to. So here, the pawn push is something I predicted, and all of this makes sense to me. The knight is attacking, so you develop your other knight. And this pawn coming here was something very interesting to me. I know it has to do usually in the Sicilian with the knight coming to this very annoying, the queen basically getting situated, but I didn't really know how it plays out in every scenario. So in this scenario, for example, let's say the pawn attacks the knight. This game is already a very different game. And the idea here is that you could check, you could take, and then you could plant your knight here. And this knight is surprisingly a little annoying to get rid of. The idea is, like, let's say you try to do this. Well, this is just losing. Oops, that would be bad. Your queen's in the position, and is just, you're down a pawn this early on, and you're winning as white. So attacking the knight in that way doesn't work. So let's say you go knight c5. With the idea that now your queen watches this pawn and you have two watchful eyes here. Here, I didn't analyze as much, but apparently you just keep up the pressure. And if something like this, I think you could, you can take this with check and then go back to your position, and you're clearly winning. There's you're up a pawn, you're putting a lot of pressure, and it's not very simple, and you just keep the pressure. It's not very simple to decide what to do as black here. So obviously these are super GMs. They're beasts at the game. They don't fall for those types of tricks. And we get this position playing out instead, with the pawn blocking any checks from the bishop. Here, white places the bishop here. I thought he might just place it here, defending the knight. I think that was also an okay move. But in this case, places the bishop, attacking the knight, and black decides to protect it this way. I looked at lines with the pawn attacking the knight straight away, and apparently that's just better for white because white wants to trade off, wants to get rid of this bishop to get into the position faster. And I think the idea here is that, like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember exactly how it went, but you're just, I don't know. I don't really remember exactly how it went, to be honest. I guess you could, I remember. I think you could spend a lot of resources protecting this pawn, and it actually works. Like, you could actually protect the pawn. Like, your queen can come here, your knight gets into the position, it's a nice outpost, there are no pawns to attack the knight, there's no light squared bishop anymore to attack the knight, so this position becomes very dangerous for black. I think that's essentially what it is. And black doesn't have a safe haven, right? The pawn structure gets ruined, and it can't castle this way. So very early on, you could set up an attack by trading your knight for the light squared bishop, putting your positions in, putting yourself in a nicer position. Obviously, that's if the queen comes here to attack. I mean, you could see the elo bar changing a lot, but I think that's the general idea of that move. Yeah, you could spend a lot of resources protecting, and you're fine. You're gonna castle. Black is kind of constrained here, might attack you, but it's just winning. Wow, that's actually crazy. you get into the position like a maniac. Jesus, soon you could even win the rook and whew, or even place the knight there, and it's like checkmate soon. Well, not really because the knight covers, but that's actually crazy. Okay, I didn't see that line when I was analyzing. I analyzed for quite a while too today. Okay. None of that happens, but that's very interesting. You know, the fact basically just the knight coming here is super annoying for black. So he doesn't do that, and instead he brings the queen here, indirectly pressuring the king, and black puts his bishop here. I looked at lines where black doesn't put the bishop here, and this indirect threat is could be very annoying. Then white moves this pawn. I saw or hypothesized or understood generally all of the moves up until here. At this point, I would have just castled. Apparently that's equally as good according to the engine. But he pushes this pawn here, which is like so cool to me. Like, I guess white is secure enough. White doesn't need to castle yet. White is already starting the attack because he knows that black can't really castle queenside. That's my assumption. Black kicks the bishop out successfully. I also looked at lines with the bishop coming here, and there's subtle differences, but from my understanding, black can immediately start attacking. And I guess the thought process is that the bishop placed here has more access to these squares, which are more useful than these squares. I don't know. Like, that's my really... I've a little bit analysis. And when the bishop comes here, it also blocks the queen's access to this pawn. And if the pawn attacks the knight, then the protection of the center pawn goes away. So, I mean, that probably makes more sense. So anyway, he brings the bishop back here. The pawn goes forward to attack the knight. Now, why at this point? Why use this point to attack? Well, the engine says start your attack. Again, I don't know how big of a difference this is, but I'm assuming for super GMs, it's a huge difference. And attacking the knight right away isn't the best move, and we could see why. It sort of simplifies the position and makes it harder for black to go on the offensive, because now white has more material to attack. I actually predicted this knight move just to develop the knight and to kind of, I don't know, get more into the position. White castles here. I thought this was a serious threat right now. I really thought that was like, you know, very serious. But I was looking at ideas. Oh, wait. I'll tell you one more idea why the bishop thing doesn't work. Because I thought it was really interesting. Let's say this happens. Everything else but the bishop is placed here instead. And the knight comes here. It looks like the bishop is stopping the knight from coming in. But you actually have this nice pawn move, which threatens a fork and forces white to already react differently. So it's like all of these like very interesting concepts, and I'm assuming this is how they work. But you know, if anyone in the comments can correct me, like feel free to do so. Just use the timestamp so I know what place you're talking about. But anyway, we get to this position, and it seems like this pawn's gonna be hard to protect for Prague, right? This is Prague versus Wei Yi, by the way. I hope I pronounced Wei's name correctly. I should have mentioned that in the beginning. But anyway, the knight comes here. It's developed, but it's also threatening some annoying things, attacking the queen. White is unfaced. And I think the reasoning is that if you attack, the queen actually could just come here and protect the pawn. The queen comes here instead, which according to the engine gives Prague a big advantage. And here Prague was supposed to play bishop e3 with the idea to stop the knight from coming in. At least that's what the engine says, and that's my assumption of why he should have played that move. And if he takes the pawn, actually, then there's this idea g3 to attack the queen. And it connects the pawns, and everything is like nice. The knight still can't really come in. You're down a pawn for the moment, but if the knight comes in right away, you could eat the pawn, and your rook is much more active, right? So instead of the bishop move, Prague plays g3, I believe, opening up and having this idea, but this allows the knight to come in, reorienting the queen, and going for this trade, which simplifies the position for both black and white. At this point, I thought white would play the bishop here, attacking the knight, But I guess the thought process is the knight is just going to run away, and it doesn't really look at much. It's not like black's castling that way anyway. I thought maybe it would help these pawns push, but this side is still a threat, right? And this is an open file, or a semi-open file. I don't really understand too much the distinction. I guess it's semi-open, right? Because white still has a pawn here. But it's a dangerous like area for white. So he comes here, attacking this pawn right away. And the next sequence of moves I calculated before what happened in the game, and it played out exactly how it played out. I thought you could move the knight here. Apparently, both of them lead to similar situations. The only difference is the bishop is placed here rather than there, which could be meaningful. I'm not entirely sure. So this is what happens. They trade. The knight comes back here for reasons that will make sense soon. Bishop attacks, because why wouldn't you attack? If you take it, the pawn takes, your rook gets developed, and you know you win the pawn back. The knight goes here, and the reason the knight just did all those movements is to stop the bishop from looking at this pawn, and so that if this bishop comes here also, the knight can take. So it's like a multi-purposed move. At this point, I was pretty proud of myself. Like, I saw all that stuff. I was like, wow, that's cool. And white just starts his offensive on the black king. I thought this move was better. Apparently not. Or apparently they're similar. I don't know. I'm not gonna pretend like I believe in it completely. But I think the idea is you have split pawns, and that becomes a little annoying. Either way, I think the idea, just in general, is to attack the king's side, because you've kind of dealt with all the problems. Your bishops are both staring in this direction and kind of forcing black to stand still. Because black can't move this pawn, they lose their knight, right? Black can't really move the rook away. Well, I guess he could, but I'm assuming that you could just get into the position and wreak havoc. I'm not sure. I didn't look into that in depth, to be honest. So he comes in with the pawn, takes the pawn this way, which made a lot of sense to me. Instead of taking with the bishop, forcing a trade, you're still applying some pressure. And here it gets super interesting. I would have never thought of these moves, but these are the moves that they play. And maybe I was just lazy, but I saw right away, I saw this move, right? Attacking the pawn. Over here, I thought black would either move the knight back or push the pawn forward. You know, I thought moving the knight back immediately defends, and pushing the pawn forward makes it not a target. Apparently pushing the pawn forward is not the best move, I think, because you could break into the position or something. I don't know. I didn't really look at it much. But bringing the knight back instead of the king move is like equally good, because it's just reversed, right? Like, let's say you brought the knight back and then he brought the rook here. Like, you just put the black king here. It's the same moves. So, yeah. So whatever, that happens. The rook is attacking, and the knight comes back. And you could see there's a lot of defenders of this pawn, but this pawn is kind of going to go down. Knights, man. I'm so bad at seeing knight moves. So there were like a couple of times when I was analyzing this game, I was like, oh, well, how would the knight move? And here the knight forks both of these, and he moves the rook out of the way. If you were to take here, it looks like it's good because of this, and it is good because of that, and probably something else that I'm not really paying attention to right now, because I didn't really analyze that. But who says black has to take back with the pawn? He could take back with the king, making his king more active, I guess, and this position is still pretty even. Instead of that, Prague decides to move his rook back and just trade. Right? This forces the trade, essentially, because this is attacking the rook, and it forces the trade. Well, I don't know. It feels like it forces the trade to me. The king move defends the pawn, so it's 2 against 2. And I think the rook coming in here was purposeful to come here or to come here. Like, this rook is actually pretty strong, especially the bishop and the way it's placed. So the king comes here, and I analyzed this. If you check here, I remember analyzing it. It didn't really do much. I don't remember why. Maybe, yeah, it's because the bishop could just block it. So he doesn't do that. He brings the rook here. The pawn pushes. This move I did not understand. I just didn't understand. I think it stops back rank mate ideas, but there was another reason after analyzing it I understood why it was made. I'm not going to pretend to remember. Here he takes the pawn. This I did understand after analysis. If you, let's say, just develop your king, black can right away start attacking. Something like this. Can start attacking the bishop, and the bishop doesn't really have a good place to go. And if you take like this, the position is kind of equalized, but this passed pawn is kind of, I guess, hard to defend, and black has the initiative with the rook being more protecting of everything. The king could get there closer. I'm not sure, but it's slightly better for black. I'm not going to try to analyze that again. So here he just takes the pawn and goes for all these trades. And this is this ends up being pretty cool. He lets his pawn be taken, seeing this attack, because the king ends up taking the bishop here. Right? Like, you might think, what if the bishop moves out of the way? Well, he can't go there because of this. What if he goes here? Well, now this bishop can get out of the way, and this attack looks very scary. That's my assumption. Again, endgame I didn't analyze as much. Maybe from laziness. And here, if you take, you lose the bishop, right? So he saves the bishop first, or gets it in a way where the pawn is closer to be able to take, and they start trading stuff, and they agree to draw. Wait, didn't they agree to a draw at a certain point? Yeah, they agreed to a draw here. And then I actually analyzed this further to see why. Why did they agree to a draw? How do you make progress in this position? And it's like, if I were black, I would want to kind of protect my pawn. And in this way, there's nothing. There's really nothing you could do. This is what ends up happening, and you just kind of always push the king away from the pawn, and then you push with your own king. So it ends up being a draw. This game actually taught me a lot. Hopefully you learned something, and if you didn't, hopefully you still enjoyed and to see me learn something. And yeah. Oh, let me mention what I learned from the videos. So one video I watched was, it's good I looked at my notes. One video I watched, they're all going to be linked, was Daniel Naroditsky. He does chess speedruns, and it's very helpful to watch his videos, I feel like. And I take one note from all of his videos. Before I started this challenge, I watched 6 of his videos. So this is the 7th video, which you'll see linked in the description. And my note was that a pin that results in doubled pawns isn't necessarily bad. So the idea here is something like this. This is not necessarily bad because it allows your bishop to come here and actually become pretty annoying for your opponent. So that was something interesting that I never really considered. I usually try to defend that. I really am scared of doubled pawns, and I never really considered the bishop staying on this diagonal. I just don't. So that was like a really interesting note. And then I watched the Gotham chess video, and I noticed that Levy also pushes the f pawn, which is, it's just something I learned the past few days, that grandmasters push the f pawn when everything seems developed, and even if their king is castled kingside. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with a new one. Bye bye.